We'll be talking a little bit about imaging without friction, and I love Jeff's point there about let's talk about execution and what that actually means for delivery. Typically, when I come to these events, I want to hear information and data around a problem, and then I want to hear information and data around the opportunity available, and information and data around the solutions that are implemented and their impact. I'm a researcher, ops by background, so that's when I turn my ears on and I'm willing to listen to new solutions. So that's what we're going to be talking about with UNU today. So if you're familiar with imaging in any capacity, these numbers are not new. These are the kind of industry numbers. In oncology, 90% of clinical trials require imaging very commonly as the endpoint in your clinical trial. Across the clinical trial spectrum, we all know there's a lack of access for most people to get the best technology and the best tools and access to their healthcare and innovative treatment options in clinical research. And then this final point here, the 25 to 50% error rate, again, not shocking. This is the reason we have a $2 billion central review market turning in our industry every single year. We know there is a significant site central discordance, and so we've created some modifications around that to solve for it, but it's later, it's at great expense to the patient, the sponsor, and every intermediary and stakeholder. We're going to talk about how we remove that friction from this process with a two-sided platform and a connectivity that hasn't been available until now. So diving into these numbers, we're going to spend a little time on both sides of this. The site numbers are shocking when you get into a site and you onboard all of the trials at that site and all of the data. And one of the things that UNU does is we onboard all of the forthcoming trials, but all of the ongoing trials. So we go and remeasure all of the imaging data that happens at that site for all of the existing trials. And these are some of the best cancer centers, comprehensives around the world. One's a top 5 US News and World Report. And they are 25 to 50% error rates on all patients, on all trials, on all assessments across the board. And that's something that people are very familiar with, unfortunately, is we're familiar with this site central discordance. However, the impact we don't talk a lot about. The patients being incorrectly eligible for trials, the treatments they would otherwise be eligible for had they not been enrolled on the incorrect trial. Again, we're talking about very commonly cancer patients on these trials. And then the site sponsor feedback loop where that friction occurs, where the site's working their tail off to deliver what they think the sponsor wants. The sponsor's working their tail off to put forth a protocol and a plan of action around the world that they think the sites can deliver, and both of those things are not delivering the actual outcome that they want. And at the end of the day, we had a dinner last night where Phil brought up, at the end of the day, the only thing left after all the work's been done is your data. So if your data is wrong, what was the point of doing all that work? And from the other stakeholders' perspective, that's the site perspective, the other stakeholder in this continuum is the pharma company. So they are working their tail off to build these trials, enroll these patients, support their sites however they can. And this is the same data presented from the pharma side. So how are they supposed to take this data they're getting from sites, interpret that, and then use it to determine efficacy when they know what's coming back to them is erroneous? So this is an example of 10 trials that we just pulled for a top 10 pharma company, ranging from 10 to over 50% of the patients affected on any one trial, 86 total cycles of therapy affected, meaning patients that were on trial that should not have been either continued to be on trial or should come off earlier, at great cost to the pharma company because they're not getting this information in real time. They're enrolling patients, they think they have the numbers that they need to go to data lock and make informed decisions and make early go, no-go decisions on their trials. But this is the actual data that they're making those decisions off of. This is the friction that we're talking about when we're talking about removing the friction in clinical trials. So we have two stakeholders here working very hard, and neither of them are solving the core need of getting clean data to make insights off of. So this is, as you can see in the previous two slides, this is not a site problem. This is not any one site. This is not a sponsor problem. This is not any one sponsor. This is all sites, all sponsors. It is the nature of the problem that we're solving for. So there's nothing new about saying when you transpose a bunch of data over and over again, the quality and integrity of that data degrades over time. And what we're seeing when we're talking about a 25 to 50% error rate is there are lots of confounding variables, and there's just a maze of workflow that people have to go through that most of us in clinical research are very familiar with. Highly complex protocols, 30 different tumor assessment criteria. They've all been modified 10 times. There are 300 ways to measure a tumor. No radiologist could possibly track all of that. We have disparate workflows. We have different point solutions for sites, different point solutions for sponsors, and you might need 2 or 3, or in my old world, 4 different systems just to deliver the data to the sponsor and the end user in the system that they're using of record for their clinical trial to collate, collect, and eventually interpret and submit to the FDA. So that causes just a ton of back and forth, a lot of chasing, a lot of Excel files, a lot of emails back and forth, a lot of queries unresolved. And for a clinical trial where we're all trying to deliver on very aggressive timelines, as we should be, this causes major delays and major costs to pharma. So this is part of where we've done a lot of market mapping and where we find the biggest gap. So this gap, this triangle at the bottom, is the source of friction. This is where the errors reside, because we have 2 sides to the market. We have the clinical data systems, your MRI machines at a site, your scanners. That scanner and that PACS system has no idea what you, the sponsor, are asking of it for a protocol. They do not know what you want to measure. They do not know what your protocol requires to do. And on the other side of the system, you, the pharma team, do not know what your site workflows are. You are asking them to perform according to this set of protocols, but you do not know who is there doing what and when, and you have no connection to tracking that. So we have this black box of work going on that's creating all of this confusion and all of this error, both in the data capture, the workflow, and the measurements of these tumor assessments. There's no clarity for anybody as they're reviewing this data, so that nobody can check it in real time, review it, make tweaks, re-review it in real time. It just is done later at great cost to the sponsor and at great confusion and frustration to the site. So this is our current status quo for imaging. We have accuracy enforced late in central review at great cost, which go up with labor every single year. And for me, the biggest reason I'm in this role right now and I'm talking to you is because of this last bullet. We assume 10% of patients are going to be censored at central review. So 10% of the patients, the cancer patients that we're enrolling, we're assuming are going to wash out because they were not eligible in the first place for our trial because of all that friction and all that confusion back and forth to start our trial. And sponsors don't agree with the site assessments, and sites are trying their best to deliver what the sponsor's asking for, but these 2 stakeholders are not connected in any meaningful way. And so they're just transposing information back and forth as best they can. And it causes this error rate. And these, whether or not you believe this or not, we have all of the measurements from all of the sites that we support. Well over a third of all the NCI designated comprehensive cancer centers, and 10% of these patients are getting washed out because they weren't eligible in the first place. These are cancer patients, and frankly, that's just unacceptable. So what would it require for you to avoid all that friction and map this gap that we showed across these markets? And that would be a new framework or architecture or plumbing, for lack of a better word, of this system, of this ecosystem, so that when a trial started, everybody's operating in the same tools, watching the same progress of work, tracking the same measurements, tracking the same data, and ultimately accountable to the same things. That's what it would take. It would take a stateful architecture for effectively a highway system for you to run across and collaborate and integrate, because we don't want anything customized for every trial. We want this set up and running for you, the sponsor, you, the stakeholder, you, the site, you, the reader, you, the study staff at any given time, for you to see what's going on your trial anywhere all around the world. And this for us has been a big boon for the last year, and why this is so relevant, and why I want to talk to you all today about why matters for our execution, our delivery is now for the first time imaging was part of the GCP guidance. So we have the new guidance of ICH E6R3 for imaging, which says you now need to have end-to-end transparency of your source imaging data from cradle to grave. We need to be able to track it. We need to have auditing the entire way. Everything needs to be 21 CFR Part 11 compliant and signed off from day one on your trial, or sponsors can face findings. And for us, we don't know why it took GCP to mandate that sites and patients have accurate results on their trials, but that's what it is, and we're happy to have it because we enforce accuracy from the first site assessment all the way through your central review and whatever form of data collection you want to do for your imaging. And we think it's paramount for us because we see this as the missing data domain in all the EHR to EDC or eSource strategies or eSource to sponsor strategies there are. Imaging is very commonly the missing data domain in those, and this is going to mandate a much, much more stringent oversight and auditability of that data. So, what we are doing about that, and why I'm so happy to be talking to you guys today, is we have the platform that connects all these different stakeholders in one place. And really, we are just if we're one word, we're connectivity. We are the stateful architecture by which sites can standardize on, and I want to be really clear about that. Sites can standardize their practices and workflows, and a third of the NCI designated comprehensives have standardized their practices and workflows. We'll be announcing another significant milestone later this year on that front, where they can have all of their imaging, all of their stakeholders, all of their readers, all of their study staff, all working collaboratively in one tool and delivering site assessments and reads on times for those patients and those patient visits. And then you can also have sponsors watching all of this in real time, making decisions on their trials for go, no go, getting clean data coming back to their data ecosystem and making assessments on eligibility, making assessments on adding an arm to their trial, watching their enrollment, and this entire process, just mandating this architecture, eliminates about 80% of the manual work that goes into clinical trial imaging. All the transposition of data, the Excel files go away, the emails back and forth go away, the data exports go away. This is all terminating in your sponsor data system, whether that be a CDB or an EDC. We are an open collaborator and integrator with any sponsor systems, and that dramatically reduces the cost of the overall imaging program. And in addition to that, the reads, the radiological reads that so commonly are used to mark up proposals for imaging are passed through and transparently priced on our platform. The entirety of the workflow, the entirety of the work itself, and the entirety of the budgeting is transparent to every person and stakeholder in the ecosystem. So this is us. This is UNU. We went out into the market and asked everybody if pharma was in possession of their source imaging data, and they said, we know, you're the only one who doesn't know. And we were like, you knew? You knew? So there you go, that's UNU. That's how you get to UNU. So UNU is a completely end-to-end clinical trial imaging platform. Again, when you set up the architecture, a lot of the friction and errors that we've talked about fall away naturally. So we removed 80% of the study staff and site staff burden, which I've never heard of conversation at Scope that doesn't talk about removing site burden, and this is a true site burden reduction. And we make it all completely transparent and visible in real time for you, the site, or you, the sponsor. So you never come to us and say, hey, what's going on here? And we got to say, we'll get back to you. It's all in real time. Here's the next step. Here's where we're going. These are all pre-built architecture and settings on our system that allow us to move very quickly and deliver a very, very high quality, accurate read at about 30 to 50% of the cost of normal imaging, because again, the images are not our business. We are the architecture by which imaging is going to run across. So to kind of wrap this up, we are connectivity. We are connecting stakeholders and collaborators in one system. Thousands of readers can work together, thousands of sites can work together, hundreds of staff can work together all at the same time, all interoperably, and all standardized on a workflow and a platform that allows them to get a result they've never been able to get before at a cost they've never been able to get before. So it looks like I've got 1 minute left, which is exactly my landing zone for the last slide here. And I would say this to Jeff's comment about like, how do you help make this real? How do you help make this actionable for everybody? And for our sponsor partners and vendor partners here is when we think about adding or helping sites or reducing site burden, if you're just adding a login or another layer and you're not meeting them where they are you really helping them? And we found that the best way to help a site and remove the burden is to work in the same platform they are and have everybody uniform across the board. And that's delivering a really, really nice outcome for us. And like I said, we'll have some exciting numbers to release later this year that will up some of the numbers you see here, but we've had an incredible global adoption of the platform, and from our standpoint, it's really the way forward for the future of clinical trial imaging. All are welcome to use it. We are an equal opportunity collaborator. So look forward to talking to you after this. I realize I'm at time. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those now, or I can take them on the side.